Stores, UConn's Sound Alternative. Down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. Went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. Ask the Lord for mercy, save me if you please.
Hey everybody, I am the Reverend Breanne Brown, and you are listening to Crossroads on 91.7 WHUS-FM here on the campus of UConn and Stores. This is the show where we ask our guests each week about the intersection of their everyday life and their faith life. And today we have a fantastic guest, Colleen Gaudino. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Brian.
Great to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So Colleen, I've been dying to get you on the show because what you do here at UConn seems like fun and fantastic, and you're a wonderful human being who helps a lot of other people. And how about we get right to it? The first question is, what do you do here at UConn?
I am the Chief of Staff at the UConn Foundation, which is the fundraising nonprofit organization here on campus, and I joined the foundation in July of 2000.
Well, how did you get there?
I worked in the School of Engineering in 1996, and half of my time was spent supporting the fundraising office, and the other half was supporting the dean's office. And I was intrigued by philanthropists and the generosity, just how much that they were willing to give of their own private resources to help students go to college that wouldn't otherwise have been able to do so.
Now, when you're doing work like that, do you actually get to meet these people?
Yes, at events, during their visits back to campus. It's just amazing.
Well, without giving away any names, I imagine that wouldn't be a good idea, but can you think of a story of a time that was really impactful?
You know, every single donor has had an impact on me, watching the generosity and their willingness to give back so much of their resources to help students. And I think one of the most impactful experiences I've had is an event where we brought scholarship recipients and donors together at one of our board of directors meetings.
Oh, very nice.
And to hear the testimonies of the students and to get to watch the donors hear it for themselves, what their giving does for these students.
Did that go well? Like, did people appreciate it?
Definitely. It
fair.
was, yeah.
That's a really smart idea. Does that still happen?
Well, since the pandemic, it was only a few years before the pandemic that it happened, so I'm sure now that things are getting back on track, I think we'll be continuing to do that.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, okay, so you do development, right, fundraising. Did you have a background for that before you got there?
No, I do everything but ask for the gifts. I often say I'm the woman behind the curtain.
Okay.
I gather all the information, I prepare our foundation president, vice presidents to go out and meet with the people. And then when they come back, I download everything that they've learned and help them to fulfill what they've promised to do.
So, not doing that kind of work, you create a kind of profile about the person that they want to go discuss this with?
I work with we have a phenomenal research department that puts all of that information together.
So you're a spy. Private investigator.
A detective, yes.
All right, I'm gonna be nice to you. So, but you found your way to UConn somehow. How did you wind up getting into UConn?
You know, it was back in the 90s when having a state job was a really big deal. So I applied for a position at UConn and ended up waiting quite quite a bit of time before I was interviewed in the School of Engineering as a program manager to support the office.
So you
And
were surrounded by engineers?
I was.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's a bad joke. I'm sorry, all you engineers out there. We love you. I love my bridges and my car. So you enjoyed it and you've been doing it ever since?
I have, yes.
But you're not in the engineering department?
No, I moved over to the UConn Foundation in 2000. I had been out for an extended maternity leave for over 2 years, and I wasn't really sure I was ready to go back to work. And a colleague of mine from the School of Engineering reached out about a position available at the foundation. And at the time, the foundation was very small. They had just erected the building here on campus, and I thought I might as well throw my hat in and see if it's where I'm meant to be. And it was the best interview I've ever had because it was a win-win. Either I stayed home longer with my daughter or I went back into the work world.
Did they give you back your hat? Well, did they miss you in engineering? Do you still get Christmas cards?
The administration has changed, but I did maintain some of the relationships.
Good. So you've had a handful of positions here at UConn. So you've really over, what is it now, 3 decades, close to it.
25 and a half years I've been on campus. Yep.
That's why they won't let me into engineering. But so for a while now, so you know UConn, you've watched it grow and develop.
I have.
And development, you've been part of how it's grown and developed. Yeah, that's good. Well, okay, so you're here at UConn and you do development, but we met at a meeting one day for a different organization. Do you want to tell us about that organization?
Sure. This is where my faith and my work collide. I'm in long-term recovery, which I just recently started disclosing publicly. The university has a university recovery community for students in recovery from anything. And I have a lot of passion for recovery. I'm close to 16 years in long-term recovery. And so it's hard to collide the career with my recovery, but this organization offers support, and it's a place for students to go where they can connect with one another, attend meetings together, do social things together. And there's so much stigma attached to recovery that it's, there's part of my mind that says I'm not supposed to talk about it, but then there's also the part that it's important to be vulnerable and to share what it is that I've been given as the gifts of recovery, because my life's changed so much because of the recovery community.
Well, what's the name of the organization so anyone listening, if they need it, they can go?
Yeah, it's the UConn Recovery Community, and through student wellness on the website you can find all the information. And they have the Cordial House right on Route 195, and there's a purple flag, a banner that hangs down that says UConn.
I see that, sure.
Yeah. And you can stop in, it's open doors.
Good. Well, everybody hear that? If you feel like you're in need, don't be shy. There's a place here on campus to help you out. And I do like that you use the word vulnerability. I find vulnerability takes quite a bit of courage. And so courageous people are vulnerable people. You use the word faith. How would you describe yourself as a person of faith?
And again, that's another, I was raised in an era where you didn't talk much about God, at least in our family. I was raised Catholic, and I went to catechism and did all of my sacraments, and I used to think it was the Catholic Church that believed a certain way, but then as I've gotten older and looked back, it was the way that my parents and grandparents perceived the Catholic Church, I think. So it was their interpretation of what a sinner is, and who is allowed to receive Holy Communion and who isn't, and who's going to heaven and who isn't. If you bump your toe because you were fresh to your mom, that was God punishing you.
Oh.
So I was pretty scared as a kid of God, and I was a little mad at God. I had a rough childhood, and I thought it was all God's fault. looking back, I now, with the relationship I have with God through recovery, see that it's, for me, it's a loving God, and the relationship is ever changing, ever evolving. And when I stopped trying to figure God out with my head, is when I started to feel God in my heart and be able to see where God is working in my life.
Is recovery your only avenue to God? Is that the only way you practice your faith?
No, it was actually St. Mark's Episcopal Chapel here on campus. That's where I was brought back to God and where my relationship with God really took off. I can't thank St. Mark's enough for being on campus, and I believe it was God pushing me through the doors, because at that point in my life I was not willing to walk through the door myself.
Is there any part of that experience you'd be willing to share?
Sure. So it was a really dark time in my life. There were really horrific things happening, and my sister-in-law was visiting from out of town and asked if there was an Episcopal church on campus. And I knew there was, but again, at that time in my life, I was afraid of God and mad at God. But I wanted to help her. And so we walked in a little late, because that seems to be a pattern I have. And again, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, I was forced to sit in the front pew, so I had to listen. And the priest at the time was a woman married with children, and that blew my Catholic mind. I thought, ooh, I could be a priest, which at that time was really funny to think. And every word she said spoke right to my heart. I was in a place of desperation without knowing how desperate I was. My disease of alcoholism was at a rock bottom. I had been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning, and I was in complete denial that it was the alcohol that was making me sick. And so every word she said literally went into my heart, and the tears just poured out. And she took the time after the service to ask me if I was from the area. And when she found out I lived in town and worked on campus, she told me there was church every Wednesday at noon, and that she would love to see me there. And again, things were dark, and the fact that I used my lunch hour every Wednesday to go to that church and cry is a miracle.
Well, it's still doing Wednesday services, and the doors are never locked, and anybody who wants to go in there to cry or pray or anything. That's one of the things I would say as a plug that I love about being at UConn. There's that North Eagleville Road row of faith groups. And so anybody going through anything, whatever your faith might be or anything that you wanted to explore, there's a variety of options, and there's places for people to go and have that same kind of experience if they need it. That's good of you to share that. So you're part of a recovery program?
Correct.
Right? And that's part of your spirituality. I have to imagine that people turn to you once in a while to help them.
They do, and that's a big part is, I think for all of us in life is you can't keep what you're not willing to give away. And I think that's not just, in my line of work with philanthropy and donating our financial resources, but our time. And, I'm a big believer that at the end of the day, I work for God. And, whoever God puts in my life, I want to be loving and tolerant and kind in countless people that have struggled with the same issues I have or had with God about being afraid and also being angry. When I meet people like that, I bring them to St. Mark's. I encourage them to join me at a church service. I tell them the 8 a.m. is if you're in a hurry, and the 10 a.m. is if you want to relax and listen to some really beautiful music. And I tell them that the priest is kind of funny and nice, and they might want to get to know him.
It's you said God is my boss, but obviously you have a job. And part of what's fun about this show is talking about how a person, either deliberately or maybe just thinking about it after the fact, incorporates their faith life in how they do their job or why they've chosen the career they have. Can you wonder with us why it is that you chose this career as it pertains to your faith, and maybe how your faith impacts how you do your job?
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, they're just such kind, generous people. Watching them change the lives of so many students. I wasn't afforded the opportunity to go to college right out of high school, and so had I known, or had there been resources available, my life, might have been a little different. Not that I would change anything looking back. I appreciate the School of Hard Knocks. Have an honorary degree, I think, from there sometimes. So I don't ever want to say that I change anything, because it's made me who I am today. But I really appreciate the generosity of people willing to change so many lives, and the campus. Some people give for infrastructure, and watching the campus over the last 25 years because of the generosity of people who, name buildings and just give of themselves so much.
So you're talking about generosity. I think generosity is a deeply spiritual thing. Why is generosity so important to you?
Just the results of giving of myself. I am amazed at the joy that it gives. Giving of my time, giving of my resources. I learn so much from people. When you mentioned Faith Row, just having such resources available for everyone, and smiling at a student is giving. Being willing to offer directions. I have students sometimes in the support community reach out to me, and just being able to share my experiences, and knowing that I can be helpful, and just letting somebody know that they're not alone, and that I've gone through that too. I've had people say, I'm dressed for work, and I have this job, and I, have a house, but they don't realize where I came from unless I share it with them, and that they too can change their lives.
Well, talking about changing lives and generosity, do you feel like you've ever encountered someone who gave to you in such a way that it was life-altering or helpful to you?
I mean, right away, Nancy Cox comes to mind, the priest at St. Mark's, who gave me her time and sat with me in that pew week after week, really helping me. My very first mentor was a doctor who completely changed my life by opening my mind to all natural health, and helped me to see myself in a way that I had never been able to see myself. And then my first spiritual advisor in my recovery program spent 6 years, so much time with me, sharing all of her wisdom and helping me to evolve into who I believe God meant for me to be. And there's still a lot of work in progress, but I continue to have a spiritual advisor in my life that I meet with, and I'm willing to look at the hard things that I don't really want to look at, but she's willing to share the things she hasn't wanted to look at. And I think, again, back to vulnerability, I'm a huge fan of Breanne Brown, and
oh, wow.
She talks a lot about the only path to joy is through being vulnerable. And I think the more people are willing to be vulnerable, the more we can experience joy.
Well, what are some things you've read by Breanne Brown? Maybe, whether it's the title or not, or just something that you've remembered that's really had an impact.
Well, she has a special on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there. It's about 45 minutes. And if you just put her name into the search bar, I can't think of the name of what it's called, but she really gets into how we all care about what people think about us, and how we insist we don't.
I don't.
Right.
No.
And which, leads me to one of the greatest gems from my late spiritual advisor. She passed away in 2012, but she shared with me the difference between our soul and our ego, and that really helps me to pay attention. My ego says I don't need anybody, I don't need anything, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks about me, but my soul needs people. And Breanne Brown talks about, we do care what people think about us, but the point she makes is, those of us in the arena trying to improve our lives and trying to better ourselves and help others, we're in the arena getting sweaty and bloody and dirty, and we're trying to do this work to become, I believe what she's alluding to is who God created us to be, perfect in his image. And there's people up in the stands who they're not in the arena. Those are the people that it doesn't matter what they think, but the people who are in the arena, those are the people you want to ask what they think of what you're doing, so that you have an outside view and you can continue. Because I know for me, my ego protects me from seeing some of my shortcomings, but I have a group of amazing people who are willing to step in the arena with me and help me to see where I don't see things that would benefit my life and benefit the lives of those around me.
So as I'm listening, you're talking about what I would understand to be community and being very intentional about having a community that really suits you. Do you feel that you've worked at that, and how has that affected you?
I have an incredible community, incredible. Because I do go to recovery support groups here on campus, and I'm vulnerable and I'm willing to volunteer and help others and take service commitments, and share with anybody who asks for help. I try to always make myself available and be really honest. Can I take the call, or do I, not have anything to give at this moment? Because I think it's important. Self-care is important, and selfishness can be a fine line. So again, the ego and the soul. My ego says I'm too busy to answer the phone, but my soul says you could answer that phone. Somebody answered it for you. And just being able to ask myself those tough questions. And then there's time where my ego thinks I can help everybody, but I don't have anything left in the cup to give. So having that spiritual advisor, having that community of close friends to bounce things off of. And Breanne Brown also talks about the stories our heads tell us. Our heads tell us one thing, and I think that's my ego, but my heart, my soul, when I really get quiet and take time for prayer and meditation, and that's part of my daily practice so that I can be centered and make healthy decisions.
When you discuss that, the word discernment comes to my mind. Do you ever wonder about discernment? Do you feel like you practice discernment?
I love that word. That's another word that my late spiritual advisor taught me, because I was so afraid I was judgmental, which I am. I'm human.
No.
And I asked her, how do I figure out who to spend my time with? There's so many people, and she said discernment. You want to pay attention to those who have what you want, so you do what they do. And you also want to pay attention to those who are having behavior you don't want. So you need to pay attention. It doesn't mean you're judging. She said you're discerning. And she said you can learn as much from people who have what you don't want without judging, just observing.
Well, you talk about vulnerability and then discernment. The whole idea behind that is to find a way to be open. Do you find that a lot of what recovery programs ask people to do is to be open?
Absolutely. But I think everybody I've met, and it's true for me, coming in, people are so broken and so full of guilt and shame. And, for a long time, I just continued to beat myself up for all the mistakes I made. And I can still do that. I can, take out the bat, and my current spiritual advisor will send me a little emoji of a feather, like, put the bat away.
Oh.
Use the feather, because beating myself up is not going to be of any use to anybody else. And that was, another gem from my late spiritual advisor, that self-pity is the greatest form of selfishness. Because if you're spending so much time beating yourself up, you're making it all about you.
Well, how does one find the line between self-pity and really caring for oneself without being morose about it?
I'm very visual, and I think of, we have a backpack full of our mistakes, and if we want to carry it around, it's taking energy from this day. All we have is this day. And, they say, if you have a foot in yesterday and a foot in tomorrow, you're ruining today.
It's very Buddhist.
Trying to stay very present and forgive myself, but not use, not use it as an excuse to continue unhealthy behavior.
It's funny that you use that analogy. I've stolen that idea from a movie I saw with Robert De Niro, I think called The Missionary, where he wants to punish himself for his wrongdoings. And as they're going through the jungle in the Amazon, he's carrying around with him, this is in the 16th century, a bag of rocks. And at some point, one of the monks that's with him just cuts that bag of rocks away. Because it's not just slowing him down, it's slowing everybody down. And it's interesting that you bring that kind of thing up in the context of the people that you know and that you work with and that you share your life with. The idea that when we carry things around for ourselves, we carry them around for the community. So how do you work that kind of thing out, and how have you seen people work that kind of thing out so that it also has a positive impact on the community?
And back to vulnerability, being willing to share your mistakes and be open about the mistakes you've made, and taking steps to not repeat the same behavior. I think just being reminded of where you've come from and where you're heading with somebody else just keeps you on that path.
Earlier you talked about 3 people that I would consider that to be a kind of community, each in their own way. And you mentioned the doctor, but didn't really give us any details about the doctor. So that's fascinating that somehow you knew a doctor who helped you along the way. Most of us go, we see our doctor, and then that's it. How did that work for you?
So I was in a situation where it was in the early 90s. I didn't have health insurance, and she didn't have an office manager, and she was a brand new doctor. She had 15 patients, and so we traded services for services. And through that relationship, as her practice grew and she was able to employ me, we began a very close relationship where she mentored me. By the time I left in 1996, she had over 500 patients, and I had done all of their intakes. I had hired physical therapists. I had hired administrative assistant staff. And that relationship is just one of the most pivotal points in my life that I can see God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Now, you helped her grow her practice, but did you have a background in any of that kind of thing?
No, I had just finished office management school, and so I was kind of winging it. And she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and we remained friends until she passed away.
So you mentioned the date. That's pre-UConn.
That's pre-UConn. I came to UConn right after working for her.
Did that experience help you with your job here at UConn?
Oh, it did. The organizational skills, my professionalism. She was so strict with professionalism. I actually had my supervisor in the School of Engineering said it was as though I was trained by the military, and I thank her for that.
You appreciated that?
I do. To this day, I do.
And do you feel like you still incorporate some of those skills into how you work today?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
She was incredibly professional in treating every patient with such care and consideration. And it's just something that I was taught very early on. It's very important.
Do you know where she got that from?
She was from the Midwest, and she was just super, super sweet.
That's so funny. I always laugh at that, being from New York. Like, I should spend some time out there. I have a few seconds left. Let's imagine you were on a radio show and you could say anything you wanted to say by the time the radio show is over, and it was about the intersection of your faith life and your everyday life. What would you want to leave people with?
For me, finding a relationship with God, my own interpretation of what that means is the key. And keeping in mind that every single person we meet has had or is having their own struggles. So love and tolerance for one another is so important. And I only found that through finding my connection with God.
Colleen, thank you so much. Everybody, we had a fantastic guest today, Colleen Gaudino, who's over in the what department?
UConn Foundation. UConn
Foundation. Look her up. Everyone, this has been Crossroads, and I am the Reverend Breanne Blair. You're listening to WHUS 91.7 Stores. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Do you know it?
I liked it.